Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Meredith, for this gift to the hospitality business. More importantly, the gift to digital hospitality.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We're really glad that you're here. We are live at the start and launch of our book, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. So glad that so many of you have registered to join us today. We've had over 500, would you believe, people actually agree to join us, and we are thrilled. Thank you to Sean there for those very kind words. It really is a pleasure to be able to speak to independent restaurant owner operators that really get it. But certainly we've had so many people with pictures of the book, taking selfies, and just celebrating in this kind of project that we've been working on. Meredith, good morning. How are you feeling about it all?
Honestly, I teared up watching that video. It's been so amazing. First of all, seeing the support for the book and all those selfies, but I think even more importantly, just seeing all those faces of people who've become friends on this journey as we went through. You know, a lot of the people that you were showing in the video are contributors in the book. People that we interviewed who are leading innovation in the restaurant industry. And, you know, early on, many of them we did not know. And now they are people that I would say we are traveling this journey together.
Absolutely. Well, today we've got a bit of a packed agenda, as you know. We're going to talk about the book, of course, why wouldn't we? We're going to touch on really about what the book is about and share with you some of our videos that we've done recently on our reflections on the book writing process and talk a little bit about that. And then we have some behind the scenes footage, some cutting room floor, if you will, of some of our interviewees, including Noah Glass, Alex Cantor, and Brian Reese. And we'll touch on some of the themes that they explore in that and really discuss that really as further kind of evidence of just the level of discussion and debate that's happening in this particular arena right now. And then we'll take a sneak peek on a bit of content that we're going to be putting out on Learn.Delivery soon with Zach Goldstein, who we've done a follow-up interview with from Thanks. Zach is the CEO and founder of Thanks, and he was kind enough to share some of his time with us. So we'll give you a little snippet of that. And then it's really over to you, our audience, so that you guys can ask us some questions, things that are on your mind about either the book writing process, us, the idea of digital disruption and how it's affecting restaurants. So we've got lots to cover in the next hour. But for those of you that have yet to read the book, or perhaps you haven't even read much about it at all, let me give you a very brief overview, a synopsis, if you will, as to what we try to achieve here. The book tackles the digital disruption affecting the restaurant industry. It's much like retail was 20 years ago, except there are now consumers with a much heightened level of expectation around their online experience. You know, we start the book talking about the consumer because that's the right place to start. The fact that they really are driving the change and how their lack of time, their changing sociological trends, and just their knowledge around food in general just forces this agenda. You know, the book progresses from there to touch on the different models that exist, how marketplaces were formed, the international models that are perhaps a little more mature than the US, and why certain cuisines like pizza work better than others, and why this moment really is you know, the biggest thing to hit restaurants since perhaps the drive-through hit America a number of decades ago. We then tackle profitability, building trade values, menu tweaks, before exploring operations and real estate growth through ghost kitchens, and really through the importance of efficiency and looking outside towards the drivers that deliver your food and actually think about how they play such a significant role in the delivery ecosystem. And then we hand it off to marketing, probably the most challenging but significantly different aspect of the digitization of this industry, and how that if you can nail that, perhaps the door of virtual brands could actually open for you and open up a brand new world of potential opportunity for your restaurant business. So there's a lot we pack into these 264 pages of content, and we hope it will help the industry. We hope it will help those that are still trying to get to grips with it, really understand why we're doing this. And hopefully people will get some value from it. Meredith, let's get into some of our reflections on writing the book. Why don't we do that? Because over the last week or so, we've been recording a few videos. And the first one that we recorded was associated to our favorite chapter. So let's have a listen into these. Hi everyone, I'm here at Sapphire Cellar Craft and Cook. It's a lovely little restaurant here on the coast of Laguna Beach. And one of the things which I'm thinking about right now is which was my favourite chapter to actually write within the book. And it's interesting for me because there are a number of chapters I enjoyed, but probably the favourite one was the one about the future of food. In the very last chapter, we asked everyone that we spoke to what was the thing that they could see coming in the 10 years ahead. And for me, that was a really enjoyable chapter to write, largely because it just proves there's so much still yet to happen, so much still yet to change. And actually the most agile of restaurants are probably those that have got the best chance of success in the years ahead. Whether that be with regards to drones, whether that be with regard to personalization 3.0, there's a lot more still further down the line. That's really exciting. So hopefully you guys will enjoy reading that.
My favorite chapter to write was chapter 2, Our Tastes Are Changing. And I love it because it starts where everything starts, with the consumer. I talk to a lot of restaurants who say things like, if venture capitalists would just stop investing in our industry, everything could go back to normal. Or, once the pandemic is over, everything will go back to normal. But the truth is, the consumer's been changing for a while. Consumers now eat to share their identity. They make food choices to share their identity. And whether that identity is a food preference, a nutritional profile, they want you to know what it is that they love via the food choices they make. And digital makes it so much easier to choose personalized food.
Customers are certainly more knowledgeable about the food they eat, Meredith. How do you think that is affecting the way restaurants are strategizing their future kind of business?
I think we're seeing a ton of restaurant innovation right now, where you see a bunch of new concepts popping up, whether they're traditional four-wall or virtual restaurant brands, many of which cater to a specific, what we'll call in the book, micro niche, meaning something that maybe wouldn't have been possible to serve economically previously, but is now, particularly with a virtual brand. Going after things like keto or vegan. You also see big restaurant chains doing this, and we talk about in the book Chipotle being an excellent example of this with their lifestyle bowls, where a consumer can easily choose a bowl that is Whole30 compliant or keto compliant or paleo compliant, and eat in line with how they wish to consume food. Now, this is also very related to something you talked about in your future chapter, your favorite chapter. You alluded to something called personalization 3.0, which sounds pretty out there. Do you think we're really even fully in personalization 2.0 yet?
No, I don't. I think obviously there are some that are there doing personalization 2.0, but ultimately we're talking about customer data, and customer data is something that first restaurants need to be able to acquire. And I think that is still a big challenge for many restaurants out there, being able to get access to the data. It's one of the with regards to marketplaces and restaurants not having visibility as to who their customer is. So that's obviously the advent of first-party ordering and being able to understand who your customer is, how often they're ordering from you. And then once you've got that base of data, being able to utilize it to personalize to your customers, to help them actually understand exactly who you are, to be able to form a digital relationship, a consumer relationship in a way that perhaps previously wasn't possible. But personalization 3.0, Meredith, that's where it takes it to an entirely new level, I think, where we're going to start to see multiple data streams associated to things like your nutritional profile, what your doctor has advised you to eat or not eat, and how that kind of overlays into your eating habits alongside the platforms that we order food. So I think it's a few years off yet, but I'm excited to see where it comes. Okay, our next video we're going to touch on was what was the most difficult thing about writing this book? There certainly were a number of challenges. So why don't we have a listen to our answers to that one? So what was the most difficult thing about writing a book? Well, writing a book is a bit like walking up a long hill, much like I'm doing right now. It's a slog, it really is. And you really require a level of tenacity and focus, much like many of the entrepreneurs and innovators have had to do in their businesses that we featured within Delivering the Digital Restaurant. The thing about most of writing a book like this, though, is trying to really figure out what not to include. and to be able to be as clear and true to the story as you possibly can, because there's so much to say. The toughest thing is really about figuring out what not to say. But the great thing is that when you reach the top, when you've finished the kind of work, you've got such a wonderful view of the entire landscape that you've just been writing about. You have an appreciation of where, not just where things are, but where things are going ahead. And so the slog is definitely worth the climb up the hill.
The hardest thing about writing a book was finding the time to do it. As a working mom, it seems like there's never enough time in the day. And adding a book to the mix meant that I had to really want to do it. And I did. There's so many awesome innovators that the restaurant industry needs to meet, and so much change happening that the industry needs to hear about. The motivation kept me going. So did my co-author, Carl, who kept me on track. Thanks, Carl. It did not come without some sacrifice, though. And there were many 6 a.m. writings, 11 p.m. writings, and Saturday mornings where I would kick my husband and son out of the house so I could catch up. In the end, I think the sacrifice was worth it, though. I hope you do, too. The hardest thing
the sacrifice was hopefully definitely worth it, Meredith. And thank you for the shout out there. And thank you too for everything you've been able to support me with on this journey. One of the things which I think many people don't recognize is actually how amazing you are at being able to provide not just your clear intellect and ability to help me get to grasp with the idea of writing a book like this, but actually the way in which your network have so come to support you, not with just the interviews, but also with just the support and being able to, get this book in front of the people that it needs to get in front of. So thank you for that. But one of the things I want to thank you for especially is your editorial knife, your scissors, because I think this book would have been 564 pages if I had my way. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I am a woman of few words, and the words that I choose are densely packed. It's true. I think as I reflect on the book journey, there is no way that I could have written this without a co-author and in particular without you. I think that our skills were incredibly complementary, both in terms of, my red pen and taking out your words, but also in terms of your organizational skills. And as I said in the video, really keeping me on track. I think my writing approach was much more, open-ended and creative, and I would write when the inspiration struck me. And you were a taskmaster saying, no, now it's time for chapter 4, like get on it, right? And I think over the course of the book, we really learned how to lean into each other's strengths.
Absolutely. And then your comments there about being obviously a working mom, have you picked up on any particular tips or recommendations that you'd offer to others that you've learned along the way?
Oh my goodness. Well, so I've recently been reading a book called Hunt, Gather, Parent, which is very good. And one of the things that she recommends in the book is that your kids need to be part of the adult world and they need to see the work that you're doing. And at first that was very hard for me because I sit at my computer a lot typing, and that did not seem like a good role model for a 5-year-old who I'm trying to keep off the screen. But then I realized I do so many other things, right? I build buildings. I look at restaurants and talk about how they're succeeding or not succeeding at the digital journey. And so taking him along to a lot of the restaurants that we talk about and that we go to and showing him what I'm seeing has been really, and finally, actually yesterday, I had some floor plans, a schematic up on my computer screen, and he came into my office and he says, "Mom, is that one of your restaurants?" And it was so neat that a 5-year-old can read a blueprint and figure out what it is. Like, that was really cool. And I think that is probably the thing I've most learned is they want to learn, include them in what you're doing and help it become part of who they become.
Well, talking of learning, let's now turn to what we learned most and the videos that we've recorded for that. Of course, when you're writing a book, you learn a heck of a lot about not just yourself, but also about what you're writing about. And this weekend, I'm over here at the tennis at Indian Wells and watching a lot of people from all over the world actually bring their greatest kind of gifts to the art form of tennis. And I think one of my most kind of interesting chapters where I learned the most about was actually about the maturity of markets chapter, chapter 6, in delivering the digital restaurant. In that chapter, I learned so much about China, India, the UK even, and the way in which food and technology are coming together to really demonstrate how perhaps things might end up playing out here in the US.
The chapters I learned the most writing were chapters 12 and 13, attracting customers who get you and delighting and engaging your customers. These 2 chapters are marketing chapters. My background, of course, is strategy and finance. So for me, listening to marketers talk about how engaging with consumers is changing in the restaurant industry was fascinating. What's really happening here is a change in the economic model. One from unit level economics, how many customers can we get to come in and how much do they spend when they do, to a more software-like LTV to CAC business model. How do we acquire customers? How much does it cost to get them? That's the CAC, customer acquisition cost. And then over the course of our relationship with them, how much are they going to spend with us and how valuable is that? That's the lifetime value. As restaurants shift to this new way of thinking, consumers win because it's all about creating a great match between the restaurant and the consumer and a long, ongoing, loyal relationship between the two, where the restaurant delivers great value and the consumer loves coming back.
Yeah, well said. The marketing chapters, I think, were both incredibly informative, but also just really representative of the amount of change that restaurant owner operators are having to go through in understanding. And so I think trying to explain it as simply as possible is probably one of the most difficult things about writing that chapter. When you think about it, what are the recommendations you have to the owner operators listening about how they should best handle their approach to learning marketing themselves?
Well, I think the thing that we've learned is just be a student of marketing. Watch what other people are doing and try new things, and being willing to put things out there and see what kind of response you get. Do it in a small way to start. The beauty of the digital environment is that you can experiment, you can put things out, get a reaction, figure out which direction to go from there, which is awesome. I think the other thing that we really learned is if you don't understand at core your why and your purpose, it will be very, very difficult to sound consistent across all of the different platforms. And so I love that thought of just really reflecting on why did you open the business in the first place? Why are you there? How do you want to connect with your customer? What was your motivation? And if you can answer those questions clearly and succinctly, creating content across all the various platforms that now exist is going to be that much easier. So for you, the international markets, I love that chapter too, by the way. I think they really highlight how much more growth there is to come in digital delivery in restaurants here in the US. But which of the markets that you wrote about seem most advanced to you relative to where we are in the US today?
Well, we focused a bit on China, and when you look at China, you see a duopoly of Ele.me and Meituan, and the consolidation effects really being far more advanced than what we're seeing here in the US right now. Obviously, it's starting to happen here in the US, but I think when you hear people say that you can have food delivered cheaper than actually eating at a restaurant in China, that tells you that the economies of scale and the multiple levels of verticals being addressed through just one channel is something that Meituan and Ele.me are starting to truly understand and grasp. Now, is that a good thing for the industry? I think time will tell. I'm not sure necessarily whether that's a great thing for the industry or not, but I think it is interesting to be able to see the way in which China has evolved to that place. And perhaps, as we say in the book, it's a foreshadowing of what is yet to come here in the US. Now, you talk about marketing, Meredith, and one of the things that we've been very surprised about, warmly surprised, are the amount of people taking selfies. And it really is so much fun for us to see every day, just someone holding up the book, a picture with their dogs in the book, or a picture with their baby in the book. And we're so grateful for everyone that has done that. And we thought today we'd actually announce a bit of a selfie contest, just for those people that are listening to today's launch webinar. If you get the book yourself, which obviously you can get now on Amazon, post a copy of the book with you holding it and tag us. That's important. the individuals over between now and October 31st that get the most likes on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and Instagram, we're going to send you 3 signed copies, and we're going to send those 3 copies to 3 restaurants that you believe need to read this book. So get posting your selfies if you can across those 3 different platforms. There'll be one winner for each of the 3 platforms, and we look forward to seeing how well we can continue on this trend that you guys have all started. So I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to take a slightly different steer now. When you're writing a book with over 100 different interviews, as I mentioned earlier, we have got so much content on the cutting room floor. I'd say probably 95% of the content is on the cutting room floor. And so that means there's a lot of really good stuff that never made it into the book. One of those was an interview we did with Noah Glass, the CEO and founder of Olo. Noah is a tremendous visionary. He saw the future before most of us back in 2005, and his company recently went public, of course, has a string of amazing restaurant chains relying on that functionality. And the excerpt I'm about to play for you is really his description of the frustration that he was seeing back then and how he was envisioning the future for a frictionless operation for restaurants. So let's tune in to Noah and to hear what he has to say.
You know, the idea that was you had to believe that smartphones were going to become ubiquitous, and you had to believe that, you know, there was a broken system with restaurants that needed to get fixed. And I don't think that was, I think people sort of accepted waiting in lines at restaurants as just like a thing that everybody did, or who knows what. But I saw that as like an intolerable problem. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we waiting in this line? Like, when the technology exists that could enable you to have them know what you want and have paid for it in advance and have a faster experience, this is craziness to be waiting in this line. Like, there has to be a better way. This is intolerable.
Intolerable. So when you hear Noah talk there, do you think frictionless ordering that Noah envisioned 15 years ago has been realized, or is there still some way to go, Meredith?
I think we're nearly there, but we definitely have some room for improvement. And what I mean by that is the tools are available, and many restaurants are starting to take advantage of them, but they are not everywhere. And although we had a lot of consumer adoption in the last year because of COVID, not everyone knows how to use them. So I think, as an example, taking you to your first Chipotle just 2 weeks ago, Carl, you wrote a book on the digitization of the industry, and you had not experienced it yet, right? So there's a lot of still to come, innovation still to come, that will make the restaurant experience better and better and better. And I absolutely love Noah's quote where he says it was an intolerable problem. And what I love about that is, I think when we see problems in business like that, that is the perfect place for innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. There's more to come from Noah in future excerpts on learn.delivery, which, if you haven't registered, you should go there, because it's going to be our resource for folks to be able to get access to other information after reading the book. So learn.delivery is now live. Now, another person that we really enjoyed speaking to is Alex Cantor. Alex is a former Forbes 30 under 30. He's been part of the Cantor's family dynasty for all his life, of course, and he's brought his own vision, really in taking digital to that restaurant itself, but also now to the entire industry, first through aggregator platforms and now through next bites and virtual brands. But the piece that we're going to play for you next is his view on what I call the elephant in the room, the profitability challenge that I think many restaurant owner operators struggle to get their head around, specifically when it comes to marketplaces. So let's hear what Alex has to say about that.
The minute that you start to realize that these platforms are bringing incremental order volume into your restaurant, that's when the model works. Whether you're doing Uber Eats or any of these delivery companies or not, you have fixed costs associated with running your restaurant operations. The lights are already on, the staff is already there, rent is fixed, whether you're doing Uber Eats or not. So when you think about the incremental order volume that comes with these online ordering services, which pre-COVID, the incrementality was measured and estimated to be around 80 to 85%. Most of these orders happening on these third-party marketplaces are orders that the restaurant would have not received had they not been on this platform. And basically, you have your food cost, which at Canner's is actually pretty high. It's as high as 30%. You have the online ordering take rate, which could be, another 30% on top of that. And then, we did not have to hire any additional staff to run these extra orders that were coming in. And so the profit margin on those incremental orders is actually still really high.
Interesting stuff. This is the crux of the issue of online food delivery, Meredith. What we try to achieve in Chapter 7 talks about incrementality, but also the importance of first-party ordering. Do you think what we've been able to write there is going to settle the nerves, or is it going to create further debate among restaurant owners?
Yeah, I don't know. This is exactly where the issue comes in. I think a lot of restaurant owners feel like, as I said in an earlier video, this is being done to them. That venture capitalists have invested a bunch in these platforms, and that these platforms are essentially taking their customers away, taking their profit margins away. You're putting up a comment right now that is coming through where people feel the pain of that 30%. That 30% is real. And it's really only if you believe that the orders are incremental coming through those third-party channels that you can see what we call flow-through profits, meaning incremental profitability, because you're not adding a whole nother building, you're not adding a whole nother manager, you're not adding more labor to deal with that, and therefore you're making more money on those orders. Now, there certainly comes a tipping point as adoption grows in delivery where it can't possibly be incremental, right? And I think some New York restaurants would say they're already there. Digital delivery penetration in New York can be as high as 40% of the overall restaurant revenue. Certainly during the pandemic, when front of house dining rooms were shut down, and digital delivery was one of the only ways to connect with consumers, it was by definition not incremental. And that's when I think you really, really heard the pain coming from the restaurants. The big platforms, of course, have reacted by offering different pricing schemes for different purposes. And as you point out, the most important thing restaurants can do is convert consumers to first-party ordering, which is where there is no third party between them and the consumer. You literally just have the consumer making an order on their own website or app.
I suspect, therefore, the debate will continue on, but hopefully it will be something where our chapter on that gets further discussion from those that really want to raise it with us and others in the industry. So hopefully it will help. Now, another gentleman that we spoke to is the co-founder of a company called Service Physics, perhaps not a company that is as well known as Olo and Ordermark, but certainly one of the growing stars in this space. And Meredith and I have had the pleasure of working with Brian Reese for a while now. And Brian is a operations expert, worked from Starbucks for many years. And he was really great for our operations chapter, largely because he was saying that the integration of technology and operations still has some way to go. So why don't we listen into what he was saying to us here?
We want to integrate this new third-party logistics or new third-party delivery or new third-party channel, or even if it's a first-party channel for digital ordering. In my experience so far, I have not seen a lot of attention paid to the way that those channels get integrated into the existing operation. And if you use the example of a Starbucks drive-through, you've got a cafe that's a very well understood customer experience, and that's one channel. And then you punch a hole in the wall and you let cars start to drive up and place orders in that same store environment. You have to necessarily change not just the store environment, but also the way that the people do the work to make sure that you don't that you can deliver on the new channel and that you don't disrupt the experience in the existing channel. And so the way that you do that is not often paid enough attention to, I guess. And then when you think about integrating digital channels, now you've got potentially a third channel layering in, and there really isn't a good playbook around how to actually operate a digital channel in the same way that, like, you can download all kinds of books about how to build and operate a drive-through. Lots of point of sale systems have drive-through features and functionality within them, KDS screens, like all this sort of like industry knowledge and infrastructure has been built around a drive-through as a second channel. I think we're still at the very beginning of our understanding of how to integrate digital orders into existing operations. And this is one place where we're finding a lot of opportunity in the industry to really think through. It's not just about building like a super sexy digital experience for the guest. You also have to make sure that the back-end systems and tools work for the operation to be able to actually action on those orders in a consistent and high-quality way.
Brian's warning there was pretty stark that digital ordering needs to be built into the entire operation and not just latched on to the side. We talked about Chipotle's earlier, and also we spoke about them in our Monday Minute that folks should subscribe to if they've yet to get access to that through our website. But it strikes me that operators have a lot more to do to make online ordering more efficient. What thoughts do you have?
I think that's right. I think that when a consumer, I think we say in the book, nobody orders when they're not hungry. When a consumer places an order, whether first party or third party, one of the things they're really focused on is how long is it going to take to get my order to me. Just like when they go to the drive-through, if the line is too long, they will drive past. Commonly known as the bulk rate. I think there's something very similar about a digital bulk rate where consumers say, that's too long, I'm not going to order. And so figuring out how to make those orders as efficiently as possible, get them out the door as efficiently as possible, and importantly, marry up to the driver, whether it's your own driver on staff or a third party, there's still a long way to go. I think that you have coined a term for this, Carl. Can you tell us about that?
Well, for me, the piece is really around just helping people understand that the restaurant capacity now is something which isn't restricted by the amount of tables in your dining room, but it's now about the ability for you to actually churn out as many dishes from your kitchen. So it's more about the throughput capacity of your kitchen. And I think that for me, Meredith, is really the piece that actually is going to be really looked at when we talk about operational efficiencies and operations management in the next 5 years. Okay, let's move on because we've got more to cover, of course. One of the great pleasures we had recently was being able to speak to our good friend, Zach Goldstein, CEO of Thanks. And he was kind enough to share some of his time with us to talk a year on from the time when we actually did our initial interview for the book. And part of what we're trying to do with Learn.Delivery is allow people to have access to further information, further kind of content, if you will. And Zach's content is going to be up on the platform in the next few weeks. But as a sneak peek, if you will, for everyone here, we thought we'd give you an insight into what he and the team at Thanks are currently thinking about and working on. So let's tune in to Zach here.
Thanks was originally conceptualized to be a solution for small and medium-sized businesses, where often the operator, the sole proprietor, the owner, is trying to also do marketing in his or her spare time. So we've always had in our DNA this concept of ease of use, where we think a smaller, more nimble, more resource-constrained team can use our product to drive revenue outcomes without having to just grow and dedicate full-time employees. That's a big differentiator, and I'll give you a couple examples, but that's a big differentiator for us because as we've moved up market, we found even larger teams are struggling with the resources they need to run true, sophisticated, data-driven marketing. So I'll give you a couple examples. We've launched machine learning-based campaigns which identify churned customers and automatically adjust to the relative frequency of your customers. So gone are 30, 60, 90-day churn campaigns because the reality is many of your customers generally only come in every 60 days. So instead, the model is specific to that customer's visit frequency, and it identifies when they've statistically deviated from their visit frequency. Why does that matter? It matters because it means our system is automatically reducing rewards that you shouldn't be giving out and automatically targeting people at the moment that they're turning into a lapsed customer without a marketer downloading data, analyzing data, creating segments, designing campaigns, and initiating those campaigns. That's a massive time saving.
I love that. And I love that in particular because it talks about one of the other challenges that I think exists in this digitization of the industry, and that is the capacity of the average restaurant manager to be able to do and utilize all this technology. What was your reflection on Zach's comments there?
Yeah, what strikes me is that we talk about in the book using technology to scale hospitality. And we use actually our co-founder at Kitchen United, Massimo, as an example of just amazing hospitality, right? When back in the day when he was running restaurants, he was so good at knowing who his best customers were and when their birthdays were and what wine they liked and all these great things. But not everyone can do that, right? Not everyone is Massimo. And so figuring out how to use technology to replicate that experience for everyone is awesome. And what Zach's talking about is like there's this middle in between as you start out with this one guy who really gets it and knows how to create a wonderful environment for all of his guests. And then the next thing you do to try to expand that is you start doing all this data analytics and Excel and trying to figure out how to create segments. It's very manual, and it's just a lot of work. And what technology is now doing is taking that to a place where all of that work can become automated, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, it still takes some effort, right? You still have to collect the data, make sure it makes sense. You have to choose the right platform. Is Thanks the one for you? You got to figure that out, got to implement it, get it going. It's not without effort, but it is so much easier than it used to be, and therefore so much more accessible to restaurants of all sizes.
Yes, I think it's certainly the case. But what's even interesting for me is just the way in which the feature set continues to evolve, and the fact that the teams and that are building this technology are doing so in such a way that continues to innovate. And hopefully, one of the themes that comes from the book is also that we're just at the beginning of a lot of this digital disruption. The innovation will continue, the technology will continue to evolve and become easier to use, more accessible. But I think as a result of that, it also means that there's a need for the technology companies to consider the way in which they're supporting the restaurant owner operators get up to speed with that level of capability. And that's one of the things that really excited me about the comments that Zach made there. Okay, well, we are at the point of answering some questions, Meredith. So we've had a bunch of questions that have come through in advance of today's webinar, so we'll get through some of those first. But for those of you that are still live with us right now, please write your questions in the comments. We'd love to answer those as well. So put those through in the comments and we'll pick those up shortly. But let's go to this one first, which I think is probably one of the most pertinent subjects that is affecting the industry right now, and that's the labor crisis.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on this?
I mean, this doesn't even sound like a digital question at first blush, right? Restaurants are struggling to get human beings to come into their restaurants and work. And yet here we are talking about it in a book about the digital restaurant. So Carl, I think given all the tools that you have put into place at some of the companies where we've worked at together, it'd be great to hear how you think about using digital to address the labor crisis.
There are so many tools that are available. That's the starting point. I was fortunate enough to moderate a panel recently where I was able to speak to some of the leaders that are having to face up to this challenge right now. The actual full webinar is available for those folks that want to register on learn.delivery to listen to in its entirety. And you'll hear them talk actually about culture and the importance of a value proposition that connects to the modern day restaurant worker. And I think that really is the important way to start the answer on this one, Meredith, because yes, technology is great. It makes things easier. It makes things more efficient. And I'll touch on a few of those in a moment. But the important thing, first of all, is to really have a culture and a value proposition as an employer that's going to make coming to work for you something that's compelling and exciting. And that's true, obviously, for retailers, restaurants, anyone out there. And 52% of the restaurant workers that were working in the restaurant industry in 2019 have said they're not coming back to work in it again. They found something else. They found something better. But about 78% of them have said that if those conditions, if the things around their frustrations on working in the restaurant industry are addressed, then they would consider potentially coming back, but not if things don't change. And so that for me is really two clear numbers that things need to change regardless of technology. But some of the ways in which we have been able to utilize technology in the past is everything on the attraction side, utilizing the same tools as to how you market your restaurant to actually market to attract potential workers, whether that be through Instagram ads, using TikTok and ways to be able to demonstrate your cultural values, your value proposition in that type of media format. And then the actual recruitment process using video interviewing. I've used that quite a bit in my time as a means to not only take the hassle out of the recruitment process for the candidate, but quite honestly, also the hassle for the actual restaurant manager, who obviously has a number of no-shows and has to put a number of minutes to their day to actually manage that. So I think there are things like video interviewing that will certainly help on both sides. And then from there, the ability to have a digital communication with your staff, to be able to give them the flexibility through scheduling tools. We spoke to Jordan Bush from 7 Shifts, for example, that talks to this as well. And I think restaurant workers today want to have flexibility. They want to be able to recognize that they perhaps have other jobs. And if a restaurant employer isn't giving them that flexibility, they're unlikely to want to carry on working for them and be loyal to them. Okay, let's move on to another question. This one's a book question, Meredith. So what would you advise someone thinking about writing a book?
Boy, the first thing I would say is just start writing things down, start leaving yourself voice notes in your phone, just start. And you might find that the first version of what you put out is awful. That certainly happened to us. The first chapter that we wrote, when I go back and read it now, I'm embarrassed by it. I know I sent it to a friend to get her comments on it, and she very politely told me that it needed some work. And that's okay. That's how you begin. And I think in particular for folks who are not authors as a full-time career, there's a lot of learning that goes into it, right? There's a reason why people are authors as a full-time career, and it's because it's a learned skill to figure out how to make something interesting to other people. Just because you know a lot about it doesn't mean that other people want to read it. So step one, start. Let it be terrible. Put it down on paper. Don't let it continue to race around in your mind and hope that eventually it will make sense. What would you say, Carl?
Yeah, I was going to say don't.
Don't do it.
It's been a great journey. I think the thing that we perhaps underestimated was everything that's involved after the pen is put down. The marketing of the book, everything associated to getting it in front of people and being able to help them understand why you wrote the book and drawing that kind of connection to them. The writing was actually quite fun. Meeting and speaking to all these amazing leaders across the industry was brilliant. What an honor for us to be able to do that. So for me, I think the piece is really, don't forget that once you finish writing, even if you've got one of the best publishers out there, you're going to have to put a lot of time and effort into marketing as well. Okay, Loredana has a great question here, which is also around the book. Which chapter didn't you write that you feel you should have written in retrospect?
Well, I think for me, it is absolutely about the technology choices that are out there. We allude to a lot of them in the book as they're related to different topics that we're dealing with. But there is no single chapter that sort of says, this is what a modern digital restaurant needs in order to be truly digital. And these are the different options you have. And this is how you decide which of the many great options out there is for your particular restaurant, your particular situation. It is a daunting task for restaurant operators today who are looking at the plethora of awesome solutions out there to try to figure out where to begin. In one interview we did, an independent restaurateur told us that he gets about 10 emails or phone calls a day from salespeople from these tech companies. And he said, I'm a nice guy. At first I tried to reply to all of them and talk to all of them. And then I realized, oh my God, I have a restaurant to run. Like, I cannot possibly talk to all these people. And now I just ignore them. And I think that story tells you a lot about the influx of what restaurateurs are experiencing, where every day someone's calling them up and saying, you need this, I have this amazing thing, you need to add this thing. And that is a very overwhelming experience, especially for someone who got into the hospitality industry because they like people, not necessarily because they like technology. So as I reflect on, further writing, I think that helping particularly the independent restaurant figure out where to begin on that tech journey is something else that I wish we had included.
Yeah. Absolutely, I would agree. And maybe a bonus chapter soon. Who knows? Well, we might get round to it. All right, Rebecca, you were asking me, I said I'd left out many things from the book to make it a clear narrative, and what were the most difficult concepts I had to cut out from the content, and why did I choose to leave it out? Well, I tried not to, but Meredith was very sharp.
Yeah.
No, I think we covered most core concepts, quite honestly, Rebecca. I really do. I think we were able to get into the book everything we wanted to get into the book. I think the pieces that we had to miss and take out were sometimes just extra levels of detail, extra levels of depth where we embellish upon the stories further. We did specifically want to try and include the fictional stories at the start of each chapter, not because they carry any particular reality. They are fictional, but the point is that they represent the mindset of the modern day consumer, the modern day American family. And it's important for the reader to understand that perspective before they read the technical content that's to follow. And so for me, it was more about trying to make sure we touch on all the different aspects as opposed to any particular core component that we removed out. Meredith, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we just have so many difficult things to talk about in this book. I mean, really, the restaurant industry it's just changing so much in its nature that trying to boil that down into the most important thing throughout was challenging.
Yeah. Okay, we've got another question here. So let me just pull this up. Thomas Hastings asks, does the digital trend reinforce the dependence on highly processed food? What should you say to that?
I think this is such a great question. And I honestly, I'm of two minds of what's going to happen here. The one thing that I always keep in mind as my North Star is our consumer, right? And we have learned so much over the last, 20 years about nutrition and what's important to fuel our bodies and keep us healthy. Truly, when I think of my own upbringing, I'm from the middle of America. The things that I was taught about food, even with, frankly, parents who grew things in the garden growing up, are so different from what I have learned now as an adult. Science has advanced, the way we talk about these things has advanced. And for many people, as I said earlier in the video, food has become about their identity. And whether that identity is, I only eat organic, or I only eat whole foods and not processed foods, that has started to become something that people really are proud of and want to share. As a result, I think digital has the capability of making it even easier to embrace one of these healthier eating lifestyles. And it does that in a couple of ways. The first is that if you want to personalize your order at any restaurant, it's so easy to do that with digital. The second is that digital enables these micro niche brands, as I alluded to earlier, particularly in the form of virtual brands. So historically, it might have been very, very hard to start and grow a vegan concept. There maybe just weren't enough consumers out there to be able to roll it out nationally, right? You're never going to be able to do that. But if that vegan concept is riding on top of another existing restaurant, it doesn't need $2 million in sales to make it work. It needs $200,000 in sales. And that there probably is enough surrounding demand to make that happen. So those are kind of the plus sides of digital in my mind, where I think they can enable healthier eating. The minus side of digital, and the contrary point, would be the advent of using algorithms in marketing to talk about food and convince a consumer to come in and buy more and more often and different. And, the truth is, algorithms respond to what humans teach them. And so if a human teaches an algorithm that I like cheese, which since I'm from Middle America, I do and love cheese.
You like cheese.
I am going to click on any offer that includes cheese, I promise you. Then I'm going to be offered more cheese, right? That's how these algorithms work. They're self-learning and they respond to the individual at the other end and the things that they click on. So, unfortunately, for those of us who, have cheese habits, as I do, I am going to be offered more cheese, which may not be the best thing for me to be eating cheese all the time, right? So to the extent that I might be a consumer who eats a lot of processed foods and likes processed foods, those are going to be the things the algorithm learns to serve more of to me. So there's sort of two paths here. I think it can go two ways, but overall, I'm very optimistic because I think that digital makes it much easier to access healthy foods.
Yeah, great answer. Derek has a question here, which you're a complete book nerd, so I know you've got some great answers for this one. But what books and authors are you personally inspired by, and what would you recommend that Derek reads next?
Yeah, well, Lawrence and Gracia wrote a book called The $1 Billion Brand Club, Carl, which you and I both read just before we started writing this book. And if you read it and think restaurant, 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 while he's talking about what's going on in apparel and CPG with the advent of direct-to-consumer brands, you will see the future. It's very obvious, right? Okay, you're gonna take everything that happened with Warby Parker and Bonobos and the Honest Company and Dollar Shave Club, and you're just gonna port that right over into restaurants, and you can see exactly what the future will bring. So I would recommend that book, no question, should be top of your reading list. How about you, Carl?
Well, the book I always love to talk about is The 4-Hour Work Week, which of course has been out for, 15 or so years now. And the reason I like it is much like what we try to achieve with our own book. It's about changing a mindset. It's about changing a framework of reference. In his context, it was around how you use your time more effectively. And I think it's great because it just is a very effective way of being able to demonstrate principles that he's put into practice himself. He walks the talk, and I think that's a really important component to have as a writer, and that really stood out for me. But the other one I'd say, which I think is something you've read as well, it's called The Go-Giver. It's a lovely short book which talks about the importance of giving back and giving to others without the expectation of receiving something in return. And the analog that I'll make to that is very much as to why we wrote this book. We wrote this book to give back to the restaurant industry, an industry that we both love and we care about. And we thought this was perhaps the best mechanism to help the industry get to grasp with the challenges that it's facing. And that's very much at the heart of why we wrote it. And so The Go-Giver is a great book that touches on that for many different contexts. Okay, we've got another question here, which is an interesting one. Victoria Brady asks, what is the number one thing tech companies can do to make it easier for operators to adopt tech as a solution?
Wow, that's a good question. And I think in particular, an excellent question for the independent restaurant, for a smaller restaurant chain that maybe doesn't have a IT or tech or digital department, as it were. So Carl, what do you think they should be doing?
Well, if they don't have a support team that really focuses on customer success, then they need to get one. The importance of onboarding a restaurant operator through the process, not just at the point when it goes live, but also in the weeks that follows, I think really differentiates the great tech companies from the average tech companies. The reason you see the likes of Toast do so well is because they invest a lot of time in this. DoorDash, of course, also try to do it in their own way. And I think that's an important component for any tech company to think about. How do you want to help restaurants really truly understand how to utilize the products and the feature sets that's available to them? The funny thing that I often think about when we talk about third party and first party and data is what data do restaurants use today, and how do they use the data they've currently got to really help their business move forward? And I think that is something which is a great kind of thought really just to consider, because the reality is that unless we create space for restaurants to be able to use the data and to be able to build the functionality for them to be able to use that data and have the technology businesses being a support function ongoing, then I think they'll never really truly reach what the technology has in its promise to be able to offer to restaurants. So I think there's going to be a support function aspect to that one, Victoria. Okay, Katia asks, how do you see the future of third-party delivery platforms? There is a lot of negative sentiment regarding the fees they charge and working conditions of the drivers, yet there's a lot of innovation and consumer education coming from them. Just would love to hear your take on the situation.
That's a good one. Yeah, we describe it as a love-hate relationship in the book between the restaurants and the platforms. We also talked to two different drivers, one who is not very happy about being a driver and one who is thrilled to be a driver. So there's definitely a lot of mixed opinions out there as to whether these platforms are a force for good or a force for evil. I think, as I reflect on the book, there is no question about who wins when a platform comes into an industry, which restaurants are, well along the path. They've got many analogs before them of other industries that platforms have come into. There's no question who wins. It's always the consumer, right? The platforms make things easier. They make things cheaper. They make things faster. They make things more comparable. And all of those things are good for the consumer. Now, there's a lot that happens on the back end that can completely change the makeup of an industry. It can completely change the working conditions of an industry, the number of jobs available in an industry. You think about the rise of OTAs in the travel industry, online travel agencies. How many travel agents do you know today? Not very many, right? The world has fundamentally changed because of the existence of these platforms. And so many things have changed about how we book hotels, how we fly. You've had entire industries consolidate, like when you think about hotels in particular, in response to the rise of the OTAs. So, I think overall, these platforms are a force for good, especially for the good of the consumer. But they do force a lot of change to occur. What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, I would agree. I would just go a step further in the sense of without them, I think we'd have lost a lot more restaurants last year. Mm-hmm. I think without the ability to have marketplaces, we'd have probably had a lot more casualties. But there's a challenge. There really is a challenge. I think online ordering does need first-party ordering. It does need an ability for restaurants to be able to have that conversation, to be able to understand who their consumer is. And I think that the platforms certainly provide a convenience for a consumer that perhaps doesn't know what they want and wants to search for variety. But if your food is that good, if your digital proposition is that great, if your ability to have a loyalty program that connects with them in a way that allows them to realize that coming to your first-party platform is better than going to a third-party platform, that is the way I think we'll find restaurants win, because then they'll even the blend. They'll acquire customers through the third-party marketplaces and they'll retain them through the first party. And I think that will be the trick of being able to master the digital landscape. All right, Meredith, my goodness, that hour has flown by. Hopefully everyone has enjoyed this. And thank you so much for joining us. We are going to play the video that we played at the start just to see us off. But please tell all your friends, tell everyone in your network about the book. They can get it today on Amazon. They can get it on Barnes & Noble. They can get it direct from us if they really wish to on our own website. Register for our Monday Minute podcast. It comes out every Monday morning where we reflect on the top headlines from the previous week. And please let us know your thoughts about the book. We'd love to see those selfies. Don't forget to take part in the contest. And thank you, everyone, for all your support. And thank you again, Meredith, for making this such an epic journey together.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Meredith, for this gift to the hospitality business, more importantly, the gift to digital hospitality.